closest to the work. And we oftentimes hear, stories, the mission and vision and purpose from founders, but we find it really interesting to hear from individual contributors, much like Cory, who is, we're talking about the one and all workspace. He's a one and all kind of generalist. He does it all. He is a designer. He is a software engineer. He is a storyteller. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was your actual first position at Notion.
Yeah, storyteller.
Right?
That's very generous to be called the all-in-one person. Thank you for that.
Well, I think with this community in general, we like to consider ourselves as multiple hat wearers, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. So please keep them coming in the chat. And like Jen said, I'll be pulling them and calling on individuals. And so Notion, like first off, if you either use Notion or if you either use Notion, you know of it, or you're obsessed with it like me, like do a heart emoji. I want to see it like not a raise of hands. Okay, we got some hearts come in. Definitely. I feel like, yeah, if you know it, you're obsessed with it. And really, for those that don't know what it is, it's just an all-in-one workspace. If you're doing note-taking, project management, task management, it's a Swiss army of software. But the killer feature of Notion is that you just get to, you make what you want. So you shape it. And I'm really excited to chat with Cory and lead and moderate this session. So to kick things off, like I said, an important question. When I was doing some research, I remember reading, it was either on your site or on your blog, once upon a time, you were a Hawaiian coffee farmer. Expand on that and maybe work your way, if you can, your background back to like what drew you to Notion.
Yeah, totally. So I was a Hawaiian coffee farmer at one point. I studied design in school, and I was always kind of going back and forth between, should I do design? Should I study computer science? And I wasn't sure. I ended up doing design, and when I graduated, I went to Hawaii for a few months, and I worked on this coffee farm through this program called Woofing, where you can volunteer on organic farms.
Wow.
And yeah, I thought it was kind of important to take a little mind sabbatical after working really hard for 4 years and kind of reset. So I didn't write any code or design for those 3 months, and came back and was still interested in those things. Could have gone another way. And I kind of started my career at this small design studio in South Carolina called Fuzzco. And it's more of a traditional agency where we do a lot of branding, websites. We worked with a lot of startups, but definitely more brand focused. And was there for a couple of years. City, was going to freelance for a while. Started working with the Wall Street Journal as a client, doing a lot of front-end design and engineering work. And that turned out to be a really cool gig where it was kind of like a little startup inside of this gigantic company and like huge publication. We only had like 5 designers when I joined, doing the whole site and the paper and the app and everything. So that turned into a really cool opportunity. And my design team there, actually, we started using Notion to manage our day-to-day work on the design team. And I had been there for a little while, and I was just using this. It was the first piece of software I'd used in a while where I just really felt this kind of human connection to it and delight when I used it.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of reach out and find out who was behind it. And I got in touch with the founder in San Francisco. And at the time, the company was still only 10 people. And it took a couple of years for me to actually end up working there, but we kept in touch, and a couple of years later, I ended up joining. Yeah.
Oh wow! So that was you said 2 years ago, like of just what you reached out so early on when we're still working on it. Like you were persistent, and you continued to seek out how to work at Notion.
Yeah, totally. I just kept using the product and kept checking in.
As you learn more about, like, Notion is kind of infamous for this amazing and unique culture. Like, is there anything else that drew you, like aside from the product itself? Because you said, you're just drawn in by the level of craft, and Notion's kind of known for polish, but what else drew you into wanting to potentially be an operator there and work there?
Yeah, Well, I've always wanted to work at a startup just because I like wearing a lot of hats and moving quickly and, building new things that don't exist. But I've been looking at startups that I could join for forever, for a long time, probably like 10 years. And I never really found one that, they all have this mission and they're all trying to change the world. And I never really felt like any of those missions were true, like sometimes, but I felt like in the case of Notion, there actually is kind of a mission to like create tool makers and kind of like help people build their own software without code. So I thought it had a good mission and a product that there's amazing community connection to it. Like
Absolutely.
people just really love it. And I think just seeing that from the outside for this, it's just a bunch of code and just, people really feel a connection to this thing.
Totally. And I think if any one of us were to go on, even in the early days, search for Notion, like you wouldn't be surprised to say how many people on Twitter would say, "Marry me, Notion." That's like that. You've built that type of love and affection for a tool, which is amazing to me. Jen has this great question that I feel like can piggyback on the subject that we're on. Like when we talk about like wanting to seek out this role and finding this company that you're passionate about the vision and mission. And, I hear lots of things about that with Ivan and just being able to sell that, but also be about it. Like when we talk about a lot about, creating your own roles, and I feel like I get a sense of that with Storyteller as your first role. Like talk about like, how did you approach that? How did you go about, creating your own role inside a Notion and ultimately getting a job there?
Yeah, I think it's something that works better at a smaller startup. Is there's only a limited number of employees, so everyone has to do multiple things. So it was just the case of I was really the second designer, and we didn't have a writer, like a full-time writer, so someone had to write the marketing pages. And I can write. I've taken some English classes and I can write some words, and so I did that. And I think that's just the culture of a startup, right? Is like in the beginning, everyone has to pitch in to whatever their competencies or strengths are. So yeah, and I like that. I think it's cool that part of the reason I joined too is I felt like the founder really appreciated that I did code and design and really valued it. I mean, it's important to work places where you feel valued, and I think your specific skill set is appreciated.
Absolutely. No, I think, when you talk about, I was reading, a blog or an interview with Camille, and she had said the same thing about Ivan of just like, you can spot, people that are just, everyone's talking about a mission and vision, but are they really about it? And Ivan, particularly when he was talking to Camille about getting a job, like she was just like, this is the one person that actually feels like they actually are living and breathing it. And so I wanted to actually ask Valentin to come in and ask his question, because I think it's specifically related to that.
Yeah. Sure. You brought up earlier that you were looking at a lot of startups and you basically didn't feel that any of them had a mission that was true. So the question I have is, how do you spot a BS mission?
Well, I mean, that is definitely a little bit of hyperbole. I mean, there are a lot of other startups with real missions. I think is also, a mission that resonates with you personally. And the mission is to help people build tools that power their lives. And I mean, as someone who has been able to code for a long time, I've had clients and I've worked with people who they're super brilliant and they have all these ideas, but they need to work with someone else to implement the technical aspects. So I think I've just seen firsthand how empowering it could be to have this tool. But how do you spot BS missions? I mean, I think it comes down to like the motivation for like why someone started something. And I think I know the story for why Ivan started Notion. It's because he had the same experience I had, which is that he's worked with clients and other people and startup founders who didn't have the technical side of skills, but could do everything else. So yeah, I know it's true because I have experienced it.
Maybe you
Yeah.
can also spot it by if the co-founder is actually designing your office space with the same intention as the software he's building too.
That's a really good point. Just like, I think the level of care kind of comes through to everything. Like, it's not just the software, it's the space, and it's how we like, even like the amount of thought that goes into every like tweet and stuff, and the way we communicate is like pretty impressive, I think.
That's an amazing point, and something I want to transition to on like just what it takes. Like Notion is in a category of tool that has earned like, a product that people love. And I think a core to that is story, and story is such an important thing. The structure of story has been around for thousands of years. I think it's how people pass on traditions. It's how you demonstrate transformation, and going back to your point of Notion, like it's a tool that, you get to shape it and transform how you want to use it. And that's why I feel like people have this deep connection to it. What makes Notion so successful at doing both of these things that are extremely, really hard with this storytelling and building a community around it?
Yeah. Like marketing Notion, I think, is a unique challenge because it's everything and everything for everyone. So when you create like a normal marketing page, you're like, you like write a headline at the top and you're like, this tool is for creating documents and sharing them. But in the case of Notion, it's like, this tool is for creating any tool you want. So I think a big part of the Notion story is the community story, right? Because Notion is what people make out of it. So something that Camille, the head of marketing, did before I even joined was just really focus on community and like working with a lot of YouTubers and reaching out to people. Like if we see someone share something they use Notion for, just talking to them and understanding what they made and what their limitations were and what their thoughts are. But I think that's the strongest marketing, right? Is word of mouth and people who love your product. So we're so definitely leveraging the fact that people really love using it.
I think that's like to get to that point when people are marketing your app for yourself is incredible. How do you actually balance it when it comes to Notion? When I look at it, it's very polished and precise. Every word, when you talk about the art, everything is super polished, and I feel like you guys control that. But how do you balance that with like the community that has its own story that wants to talk about Notion its own way? Like how do you balance those two things where, you want to stay really precise and polished, but then you have people that are building up landing pages that, potentially, talk about the brand in their own way, where you can't control that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we are protective of the brand, and we have a strong idea of what it is and what it isn't, but we also, we're building a tool for creators, and we're very happy to amplify and embrace anything people create with it. So like if someone makes an amazing Notion page and it's not on brand or is like not the way that we would do it, we would still love to share it, because there isn't really a correct way to do it. It's whatever way, works for you. So
on the story of like transformation and like I feel like this year we've all transformed and like this has been a really amazingly crazy year. Like how has Notion has the positioning changed at all in how you talk about the stories and how you connect people during this pandemic?
I don't know that the pandemic itself has changed the core mission, but it's an interesting situation because a lot of people use Notion for work. So we're building partly a tool for remote work, which obviously is important in this time. So, and the other thing is we made Notion free for everyone in the spring. And the reason we're able to do that is because we have a lot of teams and companies who are paying to use it. So we've kind of realized to achieve this mission of making everyone a tool maker and getting everyone access to the software, we have to kind of double down on the other side of the equation, which is like teams and companies. and
Totally.
supporting them.
Mhm.
So we've been putting a lot of work into making Notion better for companies, right? Because they are, they're ultimately the ones who are funding the larger goal of bringing this to everyone. So there's like a few core use cases like projects, notes, and like tasks. Those are the things that teams often use.
I'm gonna in 1 second, I'm gonna ask Mishti to ask her question, because I think it goes to that point you were just making. Like, you're empowering more and more people. You're free. You launched free. Previously, it was free to students, and so you have as many people using this thing that can kind of mold and shape this thing. And I think Mishti's question is a great one that kind of is around this notion, pun intended.
Yeah, and I think Valentine had a similar comment actually. But what are the like wackiest or unexpected ways that you guys have noticed people using Notion, and have any of those ended up influencing the product strategy or direction?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some wacky ones. We have Ben who runs. We have someone who's full-time running community side of things. So he runs a Slack channel and kind of coordinates with these meetups all around the world. Back when we could still meet up. But there's a few templates he had. There's one that was a Pokemon, like a Pokédex. It was someone who cataloged every single Pokemon, and it had like the picture and like database with like all their stats and stuff. That was pretty fun. A lot of people have some people have like hundreds of plants in their house, and they like plan out like when to water them and like what types of nutrients to feed them. Yeah, I love those use cases. They're so fun. And I think it's funny because you can see like a Kanban board or a table in Notion, and it can be filled with a bunch of like business data, and it's like it looks like an Excel spreadsheet kind of. But then you can take that same user interface and you can fill it with Pokemons or plants, and it is totally transformed into like this friendly, fun thing. Very flexible.
That's amazing. When you think about you really you put it really great on like how you're building this flexible tool. You're trying to empower people to create their own tools, and with that, I feel like you have the opposite problem of like just like how are you telling that story? If you're telling like the story, like you can do whatever you want. Like, how do you then go inward and say like, what is it really that we do, and what is the core of Notion? And how do you connect to people in that way?
Yeah, I think it's something we've kind of gone back and forth and debated on a lot. Is Notion is everything? How do we tell all the stories and all the use cases? And I think the answer so far is just we have to do a lot of work. Like we have to create a lot of, we need to create a page that kind of talks about how to use Notion for managing your plants, and we have to create a page that talks about how to use Notion for managing finances or something. And we just kind of have to acknowledge that there's infinite ways to use this. And when people see a tool that's sort of a blank canvas, we talk about it a lot, like Lego sets, right? Like Notion is like a box of Legos. If you hand someone a box of Legos, they're kind of like, these are cool, these are fun, but like, what can I make with it? So we have to include the instructions, and we have to package up the pieces in like a nice way.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like overall, like there's this this new surge of the productivity, like whether there's actual courses that people are selling, building a second brain, and like how you use Notion to run everything in your life. We've come a long way from Trello and Evernote and even Asana. And like how do you maintain focus as a company? You're a small company still comparatively, but how do you maintain focus on not to go chasing what other people are doing, like the Kodas of the world, the Roams, with where when bidirectional linking is like the new thing. How do you remain focused as a product team of telling that cohesive story and align across different functions in the company to have buy-in?
Yeah, focus is a hard thing. I think it's even harder as the team grows. Yeah, it's easy to look at like something like Rome and see they have bidirectional linking and then feel like we have to implement it like in a week or something. And we did add it.
Yeah.
We do have backlinks now, but it took us it did take us a little while because it's actually not in its final form yet. We're still kind of iterating on it, but we thought about like, how does this feature make sense in the terms of Notion, right? Like, let's not just copy this. Let's actually think about like the core concept that is beneath this, and whether, is that something we want to be part of this product? How could we integrate it long term? So I think it's just about being thoughtful, and it's fine to add features, but don't just slap them on. Like I think we went through, there's hundreds and hundreds of design iterations on how to add backlinks. And we chose one of them, and it's still evolving, so.
No, I think that makes me think of just a meta question of like, the team is its own user, like building Notion in Notion. Like I'm assuming like you are power users, the entire company. Like how does the company run on Notion? Like what does it look like? Be building it and using it.
That's something I love. That's to me, that's kind of the gold standard of a startup, is when you're building something that you use yourself. So yeah, we use it. It's pretty amazing. I haven't gotten a single email ever since I worked there. It's the first place I've ever worked where I don't get any emails. I think I got an email for the invite. That's it. But yeah, so we use Notion and Slack. So we use Slack for synchronous communication, like just chatting, and then like Zoom. But then everything else happens in Notion. So all of our decision making happens in Notion. We have a very like structured process where we have these docs where people propose features, and then we kind of comment on them. We actually have a post on the internet somewhere where we have screenshots of our whole workspace, and we talk about how we use Notion to build Notion, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, but it's amazing to, we test features on ourselves and use our own product. So
when you talk about like not sending emails, like it's the one company, like how does that happen culturally? Like, is it just leadership, talking about these things, or is that document in Notion? Like, how does that happen across the team? Where it's just like, we're not sending emails to one another.
Yeah, well, we are everything is documented as you would expect. So joining Notion is a really good onboarding experience, because everything you ever need to know is on a page somewhere, and it's easy to find. And I think we do have a page about communication, like our styles for communication, where it may say we don't send emails. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry about that. But I guess I didn't receive an email for the first 3 months. So then when I got the urge to send an email, it was a little scary, right? Like I'm not going to be the first person who sends an email and breaks the focus.
When I think about just the designer part of my brain, where it's just like you're nothing's ever done, right? And it's just like nothing's perfect. Like what are some pain points in using Notion and being a superpower, like kind of this power user? Like what are pain points for you
in using the product?
In using Notion?
Yeah, I think there's room for improvement in the text editor, I would say. It's because it's so, my number one improvement would be just making it simpler. Because I kind of followed the path that a lot of people follow to using Notion. I downloaded it, I used it for like a day, I uninstalled it, didn't touch it for like a few months, and then came back to it. And it took me a while to understand it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in just onboarding and that initial experience, because it's this blank canvas with all these magical powers, but they're kind of hidden away. So making that a little more beginner friendly, I think, is a big one.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to ask Jen if you want to unmute and ask your question. I love the question you asked in the chat.
Sure, Cory. I was just wondering what's been the most challenging problem that you've been working on at Notion, and what are you proudest of having built?
Personally, let's see. I think so I build everything on the marketing side right now. And no, I think Notion is, it's a pretty, for the amount of users we have, we still have a really small team. So just trying to figure out how to scale the marketing side of things for a while, I was the only designer and engineer doing marketing. We have one more person now, but kind of balancing, adding all these hundreds of pages addressing Pokemon things and like work use cases. There's just like a very long list, and figuring out what to prioritize is challenging. So we've spent some time more recently kind of creating more of a system where we have people who can publish content now, and like a content management system. And it's just, we're starting to really pick up the pace in like what we can publish and ship and share. And it's not as manual. So I'm excited about that.
Reading, Mike, do you want to also unmute? I love this question. This is also going back to the how you work at Notion and like emailing and dealing with customers. He had a really great question.
Where did my question go? Oh, it says from me instead from Mike. Okay. How do you talk to people outside the company then? Or are you like one of those, or do you just like send them a link to like your Notion? You're like, oh, if you want to talk to us, you have to register an account and like post here, or.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the relationship is. If it's like a vendor or someone we work with a lot, we'd probably invite them as a guest to a page in Notion.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then if it's someone, I think the sales team, if it's someone they're only talking to a few times, the sales team does use email. But I think for any internal communication, it all happens in Notion. And the cool part of that too is that it's all documented too. So there's like this nice decision kind of log, I like that aspect of it. It's very transparent, right? There's not a single page in our company Notion that is like locked. Everyone can see everything, right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about like going back to design and engineering, and I know Paul Graham, like hackers and painters.
Yeah.
He had that great post in the book that talked about like they're both makers.
Mm-hmm.
And you being an experienced designer and engineer, it's a unique combination. What is something that designers frequently misunderstand about building products? And on the flip side, what do engineers frequently misunderstand about design and craft?
Yeah, I think it depends on the designer. I mean, if it's a designer with a lot of digital experience, it can help. I mean, designers don't usually consider the complexity of building something, right? That's like the most obvious thing, which can be good. So a challenge I have as someone who can do both is when I'm designing something, I'm often thinking about the complexity of building it while I'm designing it, which is good because I don't generally not going to design something that's going to create a lot of problems for future me. But on the other hand, you should really be designing whatever is the best thing for the user experience and to solve the problem, right? And sometimes that's going to be the thing that's the hardest to build, right? So maybe it's not good. Maybe it's not good to have that voice in the back of your head. And then I think something engineers don't understand about designers is a lot of times there'll be a very waterfall process where designer designs something, gets handed off to an engineer builds it, designer gives them feedback, and they're like, move this thing over there 1 pixel or whatever. And I think that level of polish is something that can feel like a little superfluous, like and unnecessary. But I think it's the kind of the thing that separates like a okay product from a really great product is that finesse and that last 10%.
For sure.
And there are engineers a lot of engineers at Notion are very design minded and they get really excited about that polish at the end. But can be a challenge.
No, for sure. I was gonna ask you a follow-up on that, like the philosophy for Notion. And to my understanding, it's just like you only hire designers who can code. Is that still true? And like, how can you maybe expand on the reason for that?
Yeah, I actually don't have like a steadfast conviction on this one. This is more Ivan, the co-founder's thing. I think in the beginning, it's just having people who can do more things is helpful, and you can move quicker. But it is a nice thing in the beginning because we're establishing, the framework of what we're going to be building on top of for a long time. So I think having people who really care about the intersection of those two things early is good. And I think once there's a strong foundation where the engineering cares about design, the design cares about engineering, at that point, you have a strong enough base to hire people who are just specialized,
No, absolutely. And I think one unique thing about the culture at Notion, you also do you call each other Notinos? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, where did you find that? Was it online?
Yeah.
No. No, it's funny. I like it. I think I don't know.
Research.
I think it was a misspelling, but it was just
Mhm.
kind of cute. I think we want to get some like t-shirts that say like Notino like on the back or something. So
No, it's amazing. I think I found that on one of the videos on your site.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You have there's a shared passion, I feel like, across the culture of Notion with like art, history, especially history, and design. And I wanted to pass it off to Alize. She has a question about creativity. You can unmute.
Hello, hi Cory.
Hi.
Thanks so much for this has been, oh my god, I just dropped a water bottle. Sorry, this has been so great. But I have a question. So Notion has such a reputation, I feel like, for being like such a fertile hotbed for creativity and a creative place, blah blah blah. But I feel like creativity is one of those words where the more I repeat it, the less clear sometimes it becomes to me, and it's like it's an opaque concept. And I would want to ask, and it's fickle, and I want to ask, like, how do you guys create process around creativity? How do you like ensure you reach certain benchmarks, and what do you do personally when you're not feeling particularly creative or generative, and how do you create scaffolding around that so that you guys can do your best work?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for that question. It's another challenge, I think, that we're experiencing right now, because we've grown at the beginning, like we've grown almost 3 times, I think, since the beginning of the year. So the company is growing fast, and when you have 10 people in a room, you don't really need process. You just like shout at the person that's over there, or you just Notion message them or whatever. But now, especially since we're remote, we have to have some processes and stuff like that. It's hard because I always think of like process as sort of the opposite of creativity. But it's not true. Like, I think you can create a process that enables creativity. Like one process we have is where whenever we're adding a new feature, someone writes a really long Notion doc and everyone in the company comments on it. And that feels kind of process heavy, especially if it's a small feature. What's an example? What would we do that for? Adding a new field to databases or something. There'd be a big long doc where we'd all kind of debate the merits of this feature. And I think that actually that process actually sort of encourages creativity, because people who wouldn't have been involved or aware of it before are involved. And folks from like the community support team can kind of weigh in on it and add their perspective from users. So yeah, I don't know if process is always a barrier. Personally, when I don't feel creative, I will go for long walks, which I've been doing more working from home. A little harder. It was a little harder in the office. I'll probably continue that tradition. Or something I also do is if I'm designing something, I'll switch to coding something. So that's something I love to do, is just like they're kind of separate halves of the brain. So if one isn't working, the other one might be. Not always.
Yeah, word.
It might be both not working.
Yeah, that's usually my problem.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Wanted to expanding on that a little bit more. I remember the CEO, I think of Morning Brew, like tweeted out like, you know, creativity and imagination is a 10x skill. To me, it's a part of that is like your environment. And I think going back to Notion and the environment that the company has created with the office, with the art, with, you know, how you can build an environment to kind of, you know, help foster creativity. How has that changed over the last 8 months? And how do you see yourself, you know, having those creative breakthroughs now that everyone's remote?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm a fan of remote work. I don't think it should be that much of a hindrance, but yeah, it's not the same energy as being in the room as people, for sure. And I think that's the main thing that's missing is we were just really conscious of, we had a very high bar for people we were hiring. And I think we hired a lot of really good creative people. Yeah, I think we also had a lot of traditions that we can't do now. Like we all took our shoes off at the door. That was the thing we did. And we have this tradition on Friday afternoons where whenever a new employee joins, we do a thing called Life Story, where they share their entire life story, which is probably terrifying for some people. Some people like it. Depends what kind of person you are. But it's super interesting to just like see how people, it's a really creative exercise, right? Yeah. Like, tell us about your kind of life and journey to Notion. And usually people use Notion to tell the story, but it's cool to see like some people use photos. One person didn't use any photos. One person just kind of had a very rough outline and sort of was a really good storyteller. So yeah, I think keeping some traditions like that alive, like the life story has moved to Zoom. Yeah, and yes. I don't know.
Before that, I think it's been, you know, tough adjusting for many people. So it's an interesting question that I thought I had. Before I get to Nadia's question, which I think is a great one, just as far as transparency and culture and how's that shaped. You talk about traditions. Can you tell me more about what Sesame Street means to Notion and like traditions?
Well, so in the office one day when we're in the office, the meeting rooms, there's like these little stuffed animals that started appearing. There's like Ernie and Big Bird and Elmo. I think those are Cookie Monster. Those are the Sesame Street characters I know. But each meeting room had one, and it was like hanging out in the corner, like hanging from the wall. And it was kind of weird because the rest of the office is, well, like kind of like behind me, where it's like pretty neutral colors, like very like classic, you know, furniture and stuff. So to have like this colorful stuffed animal was kind of out of place. And Ivan, the co-founder, had ordered them and put them in the rooms. And he said they're to represent our users and remind us about our users. So if we're having like a meeting in a room, there's like this little Elmo in the corner kind of looking at you. And yeah, it's just to remind you that, like, because you can get kind of like into, you know, talking about the problems that everyone in the room has, not the Elmo, you know. So kind of a weird one. I don't know, like I was kind of surprised when it happened, but it's fun.
It's fun. It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
You know, going back to, again, the theme of story and how much of an impact it is inside of Notion and to your customers. I want to turn it over to Nadia she has a couple of questions.
All right, I lost my mute button. Cory, this is like so awesome. Thank you. One thing that you said that resonated was just about like transparency and sort of having everything be really open. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that I've experienced is like, I both really believe in transparency, but also have had moments where, you know, it's been challenging or like distracting. And I'm curious, like, how has that sort of shifted the culture or, you know, helped build the culture at Notion? Like, how has that sort of contributed?
Yeah, I mean, transparency is a hard one because that's also a selling point we use for getting teams to use Notion is, you know, transparency, because it's a thing a lot of companies and teams want. But then once they get it, it can be a little scary too, because they're like, this is awesome, like everyone sees everything, but also there's this one doc that we want to make sure no one sees. So, which you can't, it's a little hard to do in Notion right now, actually. When I joined, we were using Slack, but we only had one Slack channel. and that was very contentious for a long time. I think it was until last fall, like we got up to like 40 employees with one Slack channel, and that was Ivan, the co-founder, his kind of, he wanted that, and the thinking was just that we don't want like a bunch of silos. We want, maybe I'm posting about marketing or design, but engineering should care about that and hear about that too. And I think that was like, I like that thinking, but now that we're, we've grown a lot, it's just too noisy, right? And it's a scale thing. It's just harder to scale transparency, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to, let's see, there's another amazing question I saw. It was from Jeremy. So Jeremy, if you can unmute and ask your question.
Hey, yeah, thanks for giving this talk. Really appreciate it. And I know you've been there for a while. So really cool, as a user of the product. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, wikis and then like Airtable, like there's a number of different products around, and I think Notion's execution is pretty good. I'm just curious, like why you think, there's kind of like magical, there's sort of this magical alignment now that has made Notion like super, super successful. Like to what extent you think it was your guys' execution and maybe, some insight that you had into why everyone else was executing poorly, or if there's, I mean, the popularity came before COVID, or is there something, different in a post Slack or Microsoft Teams world or something like that that made people like really, really crave a product experience like this?
Yeah. Well, I think the magic, it's partly lucky, right? In that in the beginning, Notion was really a personal product. It was really meant for sharing maybe with a few people or using yourself. And then we kind of realized that it's actually really powerful for teams. And I think people, like Airtable, even their branding and their whole product, they've always thought of it as this business product, for like managing data and like forms and stuff. And Notion, I've always thought of as like a personal product that also works well for companies. And I think that is kind of the magic, right? And it's other companies like Slack do this well, where Slack is used for like a lot of communities and things that aren't work related because it has a really good consumer brand. But then it also has a really strong like enterprise and business side. So I think the secret is just embracing like the little, the smaller side of the pie, and the consumer side, and then that kind of plays into the business side too.
I guess as a follow-on to that, then, Evernote on the face of things looks kind of similar, but then is it just that they totally shit the bed on social features and just everything in general, or what do you think?
I mean, I'm not going to hate on Evernote. I mean, they've been around for a long time, and it's really hard to evolve a product, that's so complex, because you add a feature or you remove a feature, and then someone's going to get upset, right? And we had the luxury of building something totally new with new technology and more real-time features. But yeah, I think Evernote does suffer from like kind of copycat a little bit of, they see a feature and they add it to their thing, and then they don't really think through why they're doing that and how it feeds into the overall vision. They're just like, someone else has this, we need it, which is something we would not do. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the thoughts.
No, that was fantastic question, Jeremy. And I think about it too, like just what you focus on over at Notion, where it's just like, how much do you attribute, like it's a super polished product. There are places where, there's, people who are designers and coders will say like, there's the specific flow isn't the right thing, but like as a whole, it's a super polished product. The marketing is amazing. The storytelling is there, but like how much of that do you actually attribute? And is it something that you measure where it's just like the story that you're telling on the marketing site? Because over the past year and a half, the site has evolved. And as you've expanded the marketing team and Camille has joined, like it's been an incredible transformation. And so how much of that is just, you and the company pushing through is like, this is what we believe and this is a story that we want to tell, versus like we can actually measure as a business, this is fundamentally like propelling us to success?
Yeah, I think, well, on the marketing side for a while, there are just things that you need on a marketing site. Like you need landing pages that address certain use cases. You need a pricing page that details like exactly what you're getting for the money you're paying. And some of those things we didn't have, we had not very few people, and we just didn't have it. So there was a phase of just building out these fundamentals. And the last few months, as the team has grown, we've been able to shift into being smarter and looking at data and, maybe taking a look at what templates are the most popular templates. And maybe we should focus on, promoting those and talking about those use cases. So being a little more data oriented and intentional about what we're building next, I think is going to happen more. So I'm excited for that. And we finally have more people to do it, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I see in the chat, Nick, he's popped through with 2 or 3 good questions. So I wanted to give him an opportunity. Nick, if you can unmute.
Yeah, hey, Cory, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. I guess my first pressing, and you can feel free to swipe it off question is, when's that API coming out?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's a valid question. A lot of people want the API. Well, I can say that it's absolutely coming because I added a little thing that says API coming soon to the pricing page. So I don't think we can remove that. People would get mad. But I personally know, I think there's 5 or 6 people, which is a significant portion of the engineering team that's actively working on it. I've seen it, it exists, it's coming. But I think we have to do a little beta test first because, when you roll out an API, something it does is it makes it harder to evolve the product internally too, because you're essentially giving everyone access to the low level structure of how things are built. So before you do that, you have to make sure everything is really in shape internally, because it makes adding new features a lot trickier internally. But definitely,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what I'm allowed to say when, but it's very much in development.
The other thing is, you mentioned you do the vast majority of your work in Notion or Slack. What are the things on your team that you can't or don't do in Notion currently, and why?
Yeah, so I always freak out a little bit when someone new joins and then they send me a Google Doc or something, or a Google Sheet, and I'm like, you do know what company you joined, right? But I think there are some valid use cases for that. One is Google Sheets, because we do have databases, and they're great because they have nested pages, which is super powerful. But if you actually want to do spreadsheet stuff where you're sorting columns by values and doing advanced calculations, a Google Sheet is going to be more powerful. So there's things like that. Yeah.
I want to give also Mishti, she had a really amazing meta question, and I'll tee this up by saying that I know that you also you teach yoga, you write electric pop music, you do other things. And I think this question, it's very meta to just creating and being a maker. So Mishti, if you could unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. And no worries if there's no easy answer to this, but I kind of wanted to peel back and sort of ask how you think about your mission and what you really want to do in the world overall, and how much of that historically has been expressed through your work and how much of it is through other things, and how do you think about that overarching sense of mission and balance?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's hard. I mean, like, I think working in a startup, no matter what startup, is never going to be like feel like the most balanced time in your life, because there's like a lot to do and build. I guess it's, if you're spending your time building, I mean, I think it's definitely a luxury to be spending your time building something that you are personally invested in and care about. So I think that in and of itself, I feel good about. But overall mission, I think a problem I have is I really enjoy making things, and I'll make things just to make things. So to have something that that I'm making that feels like for a reason right now is cool. So until I find another thing or have a personal idea of something I want to make for a reason, I'll probably keep making this thing that has a reason to be. Yeah. But I think balance is important. And yeah, like I do yoga stuff on the side, and definitely try to get away from screens when I can. It's hard now, but someday it'll be easier. Yeah.
I love this question too, from EJ. Just this going back to the theme of being a hacker and painter and working at Notion. And so EJ, if you can unmute and ask your question.
Sure. Hey, so enjoying this call. I have been having the most engrossing grocery shopping experience by trying to multitask and listen in. But my question really, Cory, is like, you're a bit of a unicorn. And what I mean by that is like having both design chops and software engineering chops. I find it's pretty rare, right? And I'm just really curious, like, what's it like living and working with two pretty like unique skills together, combined?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely enjoy it. It can be confusing because I think the world is structured. I mean, it's like you're in grade school and people are asking you like what you want to be when you grow up and stuff, and you're like, I don't know. Like I just like learned math. Like, yeah. So I think in a world that's like where people have like a singular identity, it can be a little bit confusing to navigate. And I mean, I definitely, even at Notion, sometimes I would feel like not a real engineer or something, you know, because I'm technically on the marketing team. So it's I don't know if I'll ever get to a place where I feel like I'm a real both things, you know, I'm just a real whatever I am. So I don't know, it's fun. It's fun to have like different things I like just working on different things and having different problems to solve. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm realizing we're close at time. Cory, what do you want to ask this amazing community about anything, about Notion, about creating, making, operating?
Yeah, I think so the mission of Notion is just empowering people to build their own tools. And I'm curious, like, if people here are building their own tools, like whether it's through software or physically, or like if people consider themselves creatives and tool makers, and like how they express that, whether it's through Notion or other means. Do we need more tools in the world, or do we have enough? That's another good question.
I was starting to type a question in the chat, and I feel like I can partially answer your question with my own experience and pivot it into the question that I was trying to, or thinking of asking as well. So I tinker around with a lot of tools. So over the weekend, I was teaching myself how to use Airtable, for example. I was trying to play around with Zapier. I use Todoist pretty heavily. I have used Notion as well and love it, though I don't have a specific use case for it at the moment, but in like 2 months, who knows, I might just come right back to it. But the question I kind of have from all of this is, I have the tendency of wanting to do all of the things and learn all of the tools. And I'm wondering, particularly as someone who makes a tool as vast and infinite as Notion has the potential to be, where does it kind of cease being valuable to pick up on everything or take everything to the extreme? And this is kind of building off of EJ's question as well, where you both do design as well as engineering. So how do you reconcile doing multiple things and thinking, where do I stop and say this is on someone else?
Yeah, it's I think a good way to think about it is why I was reluctant to use Notion in the first place. And it's the same reason, like I just felt like I was using Trello and I had enough tools, you know, and like there's so many tools. There's new tools getting released every day. So it's kind of an existential question of, do we need more tools? Yeah, I think, well, different things appeal to different people. I guess feeling, and I also understand that the desire or need to want to learn all of the things. I mean, I definitely feel that with programming, because there's so many languages. I know like 5 or something, and there's like hundreds. And I'll never know them all. I would like to know them all. But I think what it comes down, at least with choosing a programming language, is what programming language is the most widely used, which one will allow me to build the most things I want to build, and which one will allow me to like distribute what I build to the most number of people, which was JavaScript, because it's like a language of the internet. So I think the same thing applies to tools, in the sense like, what are you actually trying to do? And like, will this solve it? Right? Like, yeah. So I think people just lose sight of that question, or just like what they're actually trying to do. And you can get, it's a criticism of Notion a lot, is that it can lead to busy work, and like people who spend all day organizing the information instead of creating it, right? But it's balance.
I agree. Yeah,
thanks for the question.
With Valentine, and I think I can tell you with a resounding yes that people need Notion. Like, people are organizing it to do COVID response. People are using it to build websites. People are using it to do their resumes and be creative. So in general, I think Notion is doing the job one way or another. And I just want to thank you. This was an amazing conversation, and it was amazing for the community to just learn more about what you do day to day, how Notion operates. So this has been really great. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, Jen, RenCo, all of these wonderful people. Yeah, it's been super fun. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cory. Peregrine just jumped in with the last minute question. I think Elise had a question. If people have questions, can they follow up with you somehow?
Yeah, totally. Probably the easiest way is like to tweet at me on the Twitter, or you can send me an email. I have a personal email that works too. Just Cory Etzhorn at gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Here.
Don't use email. We'll create.
Yeah, go to my little website.
Well, we'll create a Notion page with additional questions for you.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I added in your website too, if anyone wants to check out his amazing work.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Cory, and thank you, Rob. This was great.
Thank you. See y'all.
Take care.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.